For an aircraft carrier, it would actually be better to have the lifting wing land vertically. The fighter plane, which would separate, would be identical to the Air Force fighter plane, but the lifting wing would be different. If you can achieve a vertical landing, this simplifies aircraft carrier operations. In fact, you can then have an aircraft carrier landing aircraft at the back while additional fighters are being launched from the front of the aircraft carrier. Even if the aircraft carrier is wide enough, you can have two fighter planes landing side by side. This greatly increases the operational tempo that can be achieved by an aircraft carrier. In order to achieve two aircraft carriers landing side by side, you probably want at least 300 feet of deck width. That would mean you probably want to have a hull width of about 200 feet or a hull length of about 1,200 feet. Current aircraft carriers have a length of about 1,050 feet, so they're probably a bit too small. In addition, the lifting wing and fighter combination would take up a lot of deck space, and additional deck space would be needed. For catapult launches, one of the landing gear would have to be attached to the catapult, and the entire assembly of aircraft would have to be turned at about a 30-degree angle. This is a lot less than ideal, but I believe it's the only way it can be achieved. In order for the catapult to be effective, the rear wheels would also have to be able to turn relative to the direction of the aircraft so that they're not scraped sideways as the catapult pulls the plane down the deck. Each aircraft would then be catapulted off the front in a standard format. The one thing that would also be necessary is to have additional aircraft which can land vertically for both radar observation and transports. One option is to try to modify an aircraft called the Osprey that the Marines have. Currently it has an unpressurized fuselage. It could be built with a pressurized fuselage, which could be used as a transport aircraft. Radar units could be held also onto the fuselage. The difficulty with that is that it's a large propeller, and the radar units would have to be both in front of and in back of the propeller to prevent a large blind spot from occurring. In order to store the aircraft combination on board an aircraft carrier, it would be well if the forward booms could be hinged and swung downwards to reduce deck storage length. They would also need to be able to fit into the actual hangar deck on board the carrier. Current aircraft carrier hangars are about 20 feet tall. They might be a little bit too short. I tried sending these ideas to both DARPA and the Air Force back in 2010. DARPA doesn't take suggestions. They're also a bunch of idiots. They tried to actually have a concept of having a helicopter Humvee or a helicopter Jeep. It doesn't work. Anybody who knows anything about helicopter dynamics, rotor dynamics, will know that you can't match the power and the weight under a design. Basically, if you want to work at DARPA, you have to get a PhD and not be very good at engineering. The Air Force doesn't contact people. In any event, all of the aircraft built over the last 40 years have been obsolete. That's F-15, F-16, F-18, F-22, and the F-35, as well as all foreign aircraft such as the Gripen, the Tornado, the Typhoon, the Rafale, and the Su-27 and MiG-29. The only thing providing any cushion for the U.S. Air Force currently is that the foreign designers are just as stupid as the American ones, and they've also totally screwed up the engineering. But other than that, every Air Force in the world has to be scrapped and replaced, and no one wants to do anything about it. The plan was to contact the Defense Department, have them actually do the design quietly, so that they have time to do it before anyone else can react. But apparently that doesn't work. The only way to get any government to do anything is to publicly humiliate them. What's really disappointing about this is that this is basically a third-year engineering problem. This is what engineering students are supposed to learn how to do. If you have a complicated problem, you split it into two pieces, solve each separately, and then try to meld the two solutions into one. Every engineer is supposed to know how to solve a problem in this manner. Apparently, many also attempted to contact several news organizations. Telling them that the entire Air Force is obsolete didn't seem to sink in, and somehow they didn't seem to think that was a major news story. I never even bothered trying to contact Congress, because it's a waste of time. The laughing jackasses who they hire as staff members think it's funny when people write to them. They think it's even funnier if somebody calls up. They don't do anything. They don't know how to do anything. They can't imagine doing anything. And yet these same brainless jackasses keep on getting promoted. Some of them actually wind up being promoted into the administration of actual federal agencies, and then further promoted up them. The stupid promote the foolish, and everything is a disaster. You can be a complete failure, and you will fail upwards in Washington, because everyone just trades favors, and nothing ever gets done. A 9G fighter cannot be sent to fight a 12G fighter. It would be suicide. Building fighter planes in two sections is expensive, it's difficult, and it's an operational nightmare. The lifting wings, once they are separated from the fighter planes, have to have something to be done. They can either fly in circles, lift to land, and then take off again when the fighter planes return. But the fact remains that it's the only way to achieve optimal performance from a fighter plane, and is the only fighter planes that could actually win a war. Aircraft of this description could have been built in 1970. Every fighter plane built throughout the world since 1970 has been an obsolete waste of money. The entirety of the U.S. Air Force has to be scrapped and replaced. Everybody who's been Secretary of Defense, Secretary of the Air Force, Secretary of the Navy, and quite frankly President since 1970 should be in a prison cell for having wasted money. This also includes, of course, the members of the Armed Services Committee in the House and Senate, who are idiots. But remember, the defense budget isn't for defending the country, it's for buying votes. The entirety of the Reagan defense budget was a complete waste of money. He burned through billions of dollars and achieved nothing. There is now an aircraft carrier named after Reagan. It is a fitting but ironic tribute to the Reagan administration. It's overpriced, it can't meet its mission requirements, and it was misdesigned. That is a perfect summation of everything Ronald Reagan did. The date of 1970 comes about because that was the point at which laser designators and identifiers were available, so that the boom could automatically connect itself with the aircraft by using a laser. Donald Rumsfeld had two chances to do it. He got it wrong both times. If anyone actually pays attention to this, several things will happen. First of all, Obama will get together with his political people, and they'll argue over what they should do. They will make a speech. The question is, will the speech be made in the Oval Office behind a desk, or in a joint session of Congress? My guess is they'll go with the joint session of Congress. They're all in this together. We've all screwed up. We have to clean it up. Obama will probably, during that speech, either assure or reassure the American people. He will also probably announce that he is committed. And then he will announce something special. A special engineering group, a special committee, a special study. It'll be a complete disaster. Inevitably what they'll do is they'll take the failed politicians and some lawyers and have them study an engineering failure, which is always good for a few laughs. Their conclusion will be that mistakes were made, but no one can really be blamed for it. Obama likes to talk about STEM research, including STEM education, science, technology, engineering, medicine. But every time somebody gets a degree in engineering, Obama puts his supervisor as a lawyer. And so you have engineers who can't even talk to their supervisors. He doesn't see a contradiction in this. Like Romney wants to criticize him, it'll be equally ridiculous, because Romney's going to surround himself with the MBAs. And the only thing the MBAs have ever produced are massive bank failures. And if Romney does want to criticize this, ask him why he didn't come up with it. And the fact is, he's got the same idiots around himself as Obama has. Equally stupid, equally pointless. The U.S. presidency has been over 200 consecutive years of morons and losers. No one knows what they're doing, and there is no effective government. Of course, the members of the Armed Services Committee in Congress also will not resign over this. In fact, they will probably insist that they have to stay. And because they have so much experience, they're the people who are going to be needed to solve it. Experience doesn't mean having done something. Experience means having learned from doing something. Congress has no experience. They endlessly repeat the same moronic mistakes. The next line of nonsense will be that the planes really are an obsolete, since everybody else screwed up too. They don't have the ability to actually do engineering quickly. Every failed fighter plane design, it takes 15 to 20 years. Taking 15 to 20 years to do this will mean 15 to 20 years in which the U.S. military has no effective air force. They haven't identified engineers, they haven't tried to develop engineering talent, they haven't tried to develop engineering management, and so now they have no ability to do things quickly. So it'll be a disaster if they try to build this program. It also means things like the Patriot air defense system and the Navy Standard missiles are also useless and have to be redesigned. The entirety of the Reagan defense budget was actually a waste of money. All the equipment purchased was obsolete and misdesigned. You may as well have taken the money, thrown it in a pit in the ground, poured gasoline over it, and set it on fire. The actual design failure goes back to the Truman administration about 1950, when they introduced an aircraft called the F-86. The F-86 was a 600-mile-per-hour fighter plane. At that speed, designing an aircraft with separate landing gear and building the actual fighter plane entirely as a high-speed maneuvering platform would have made sense, at least as a test aircraft. It wasn't done. There was something done a few years earlier than that called the XF-87 Goblin, which was built by McDonnell. It was a small fighter designed to be carried actually in the bomb bay of the last piston-engine bomber called the B-36. It was not intended to improve the performance, it was just intended to have a fighter plane that could accompany the bombers over long-range flights. For 40 years, every fighter plane built in the U.S. military has been obsolete. It's truly astounding to consider. It is the single biggest procurement failure in military history, and no one is interested in it.